dance, doing the live dance. And hello, everybody, and welcome to MECHS, Magic, and Mayhem interviews with sci-fi and fantasy authors. I am your host, Edie Sky, and if you're familiar with this podcast, you might notice that the name is slightly different now. There is a reason for that. Basically, back when I first started doing these interviews, I kind of just decided to do them at random because I thought it was fun to talk to my other author friends, and much to my surprise, people actually ended up watching them and liking them. And so the sort of half-assed name that I came up with, author Q&A and prizes, was was too clunky for my purposes, especially once people started referring to me as a podcaster. So I figured if people were going to refer to me like that, I should actually name my podcast accordingly. So from here on out, it's going to be Mechs, Magic, and Mayhem because I discuss all of those things. And kicking off the new name tonight is one of my bestest author buds and overall amazing guy, Terry Maggert. So welcome to the show, Terry. I'm so
Thank you
pumped
very
to have
much.
you. There's,
I'm happy to be here.
both of us kind of started writing at the same time, and we have both had adventures. So I'm really
Yes.
pumped to talk about tonight because you've had interesting stuff happen like in the past week. So
Yeah.
this is going to be
Yeah.
super
Something's
cool.
always happening.
Oh yeah, busy life. Before we go into the actual interview though, my usual podcast stuff. If you oh, I've already, man, my brain's already turned off, dang it. If you enjoy what you're watching tonight, of course, subscribe, like, do whatever clicky thing on whatever platform you are watching on to get more of this. Also, I forgot to ask you, Terry, are we giving away a signed book tonight, or is
Yeah,
that
sure.
okay?
No,
Yes.
don't do that. I've got a bunch of random because there's 28 books in the backyard series, and I don't
Ooh,
have like 1 through 12, but I've got a bunch of them, and I'll grab one. I absolutely I've got a box of them, so
awesome. Yes.
we'll definitely
So
give one away.
all right. So if you go into the show notes, I'm going to put this link in the comments too, but you can fill out this form. We will draw a winner tomorrow and you get a signed book from Terry. Also, let's see what other, I'm on the wrong folder again. Dang it. Quit Word. Okay. Too many windows. Okay. So going into the comments, we have our little signed book form. And also, Terry, you have a Kickstarter going that is doing pretty
Yeah.
kick-ass, and we are going to talk about that, but I'm also putting that link up in the comments for you guys to go peruse, if you're awesome and want to go ahead and back it before you even hear about it. And what else do I have here? Oh, you're also relaunching your YouTube channel, aren't you?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
That
and
was
so I've got a link to that as well that I am popping into the comments. And finally, if you just like contributing to podcast tip jars, I have a buy me a coffee and a Ko-Fi where if you like what you watch here and just want to throw a little bit of money my way for coffee, then that is where you can do that. So now all of my boring linkage stuff is out of the way. So Terry, I know you, a lot of our reader or a lot of my viewers know you, but for those who don't, give us the quick rundown of who Terry Maggert is and where we can find your stuff.
well, we sort of started around the same time, I think, as authors and sort of in this publishing life. I started off 10, 12 years ago, got serious, later in life. I was probably 45, I think, when I started writing seriously. And in that interim, I think I'm at 79 novels
Is it
or
really
70,
79?
I think 83 titles, I think. But things took off. I wrote a series. You know how it is. You teach yourself how to tell a story, how to write a
Mhm.
novel. And then things really took off with the Halfway Witchy series. And I was writing sort of kind of quasi YA or NA. But
Mhm.
sci-fi and horror have always been my first love. I cut my teeth on it in the 70s. And every series seems to have done better and better until the penultimate, of course, is the Backyard Starship. So Jeff and I started writing together in 2017, and we were put together by a group of dental hygienists from Sisters,
What?
Oregon. They had a writing club or a reading club, and they said, "Hey, you kind of sound like this guy, and you sound like this guy, and you're from Florida, and you're from Florida." And Jeff called me, and in about a 15-minute conversation, we were like, "Yep, this is so." That was sort of the genesis of Variant Publications.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. It's so absurd how things like that have brought so many of my author friends together, like so many collaborations and whatnot have resulted that way. So, what was your first big series? Was it the Messenger series?
Messen-
That yes, that
Messenger
really took off.
was, yeah, that was kind of alarming. You want to be successful and you want to tell stories that people want to
Hmm.
read, and then you open up Amazon and you look and you say, well, I'm sorry, there must be some mistake, and you look because
Yes.
I sold 17 books in my first 6 months when I was an author,
Hmm.
and three of those were to my sister. So,
I know this feeling.
oh yeah, 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 I was so thankful. And I thought, I was poured a glass of wine and I was like, well, I'm sure things will, this will take off. It didn't
Yeah,
take
it
off
must.
because it wasn't very good. So you teach yourself how to tell stories. And then the
Hmm.
messenger was like, we both like big stompy robots.
Oh
And
yeah.
yeah, yeah. I think we come at it generationally different.
Hmm.
I'm almost 60. And in the early 1970s, 6 a.m. Saturday cartoons were actually the first anime.
Hmm.
And so, Jet Jaguar and Ultraman and the Mark V. I thought all race cars looked like the Mark V. I thought all spaceships looked like Battle of the Planets. You
They
know,
should.
yeah, they oughta, they oughta. So, but that's where the messenger came from, and I think the messenger kind of was a clarion call to the idea that I needed to get out of my own way and tell stories that people wanted instead of just what I felt like
Hmm.
writing.
I had a very similar experience with the Titan Mage series, which I
Oh
don't
yeah,
know if it's coincidentally or not, but is also a giant robot series. Though mine is more inspired by like the Toonami era, which is when I really got into giant robots with Gundam Wing and whatnot.
yeah.
And so, but yeah, The Messenger is one of my absolute favorites, and it's partly because you just don't. It's a great story, but you also just don't see a lot of giant mech novels. I feel like it for giant mechs are a turnoff for a lot of traditional sci-fi readers because you have the hurdle to jump of a mech is not nearly as practical for warfare as other weaponry. Like it's a very fanciful form of military weaponry. And I feel like mechs really thrive in adventure sci-fi, which is exactly what the Messenger is. And same thing with Titan Mage, obviously. And but yeah, the Messenger was absolutely one of my favorites of yours. I've liked all your
Thank you.
stuff that I've read. It's all you have different vibes. Like I really loved the Halfway Witchy series, but it's
Yeah.
very different from the Messenger. Heck, I even loved Banshee. Back, I
Oh,
think I still
oh
have my
god.
signed copy of Banshee somewhere on my bookshelf.
Who
But
who would have thought who would have thought that a complicated exegesis on Christianity told through the lens of hell boiling forth demons in Kentucky to fight dragons could have possibly missed, it was,
oh my
and
gosh.
yet, you look back at all your books and I love Banshee. I wouldn't change anything about Banshee. I loved Lost Kingdom. I
Hmm.
thought Lost Kingdom, I wrote that and I was deeply satisfied with it. I wrote like a lot when I first started writing. My name is Terry, and I got invited to some events. And when I showed up, they were like, "Are you the husband?" Because I wrote, sort of female centric
Yeah.
material. A young witch with short girl problems, and then of course, my character Livy in Heartborn.
Hmm.
Heartborn came to me like in a dream. I wrote it within 3 weeks, and I actually had an English professor from Texas who said I got all 61 of the Easter eggs. She got all
Ooh.
61, and some of them were incredibly obscure because I used to
Uh-huh.
be a history professor. And she got them all, and she said, "I knew exactly what you were doing." And it was like the Sixth Sense meets uh, uh, post-apocalyptic angels, if you can possibly.
Yeah.
And I wrote that, and I thought, okay, I can tell a mystery because it's basically a mystery.
Hmm.
So you translate mysteries into space. And the answer was I could. I just had to make myself break away from younger characters.
Right.
Was sort of this liminal moment for me.
Hmm. That's cool. What do you think made the Messenger take off compared to previous stuff? Like, did you write the Messenger to market in as much as you could a giant mech book? Or did you just kind of, was it just this felt right and you followed the
Light,
vibes?
lightning in a bottle. I mean,
Hmm.
I can't. I'm not that. I always used to tell my students, I'm clever, not bright. They're like, you remember all. I said, that's clever. That's clever. And cleverness to me is knowing literary tactics about, I always say the literary sucker punch. That's ending a page with this absolutely short, maybe 4 to 6 word gut punch of a sentence. And that you set them up and you knock them down, and they're like, oh, and things like that come to you later. And I think that that is intuitive. I don't know. You can certainly be trained to write like that, but The Messenger was my love letter to giant robots, because I can't think of a downside to, like, I have no joke. I'm obsessed with giraffes. Well, the only reason I love giraffes is because they're the closest thing to Indricotheres and Titanotheres that exist in megafauna. And I said, if I get a giraffe, we're going to Dairy Queen and I'm going through the drive-through. And I'm not joking about that. And I was so alarmed to find out that giraffes are about $25,000, which that's a lot of money. But
you can actually purchase one, though?
Yes, you can. Yes.
Like,
and I live less than
for
60.
it?
It's about the same as licensing a dog, which to me, I'm thinking, okay. And I went so far as I reached out to a gentleman in Western Australia that makes custom saddles. And I said, hey, hear me out. Giraffe saddle. And he said, he didn't even bat an eye. He said, how big a boy are you? And I was like, about 230. And he said, we can make it work. But a giant robot to me is like, how every year somebody says vampires are over, vampires aren't happening. Well, giant robots are the exact same thing. They're never going to not be fun. And the best,
I love a good giant robot.
Yeah. And the best endorsement of it is that I wrote 10 of them. And the fans said, we want more. I wrote 5 more. And then 3 years later, I came back and wrote 4 more because I had an idea for what happens when military becomes obsessed with pageantry. They don't want to be soldiers. They want to be show ponies and obsessed with power and pageantry. And I was fascinated by that. And so that led to 4 more. So there's 19 in the series.
But now, does that include Messenger Core?
Yeah, that's the last 4. So, and you always keep a few threads where you're like, I maybe down the road, because I don't sleep really. So at some point we may revisit it.
So that's how you write so many books so fast, not sleeping.
Well, as well as I do, and I want to say this in the gentlest possible way, but we meet people who want to talk about being a writer more than they want to be a writer.
Oh, yes.
I call it the tweed effect. It's like people that wanted to be history professors and wear tweed, but they didn't want to actually research.
Right.
And to me, people may be obsessed with the concept of writing and everything, but writing is work.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I was up till 4:18. I went to bed at 4:18 this morning and had to get up to put a transmission in a truck at like 7:30. And I was like, well, this is unpleasant, but I got almost 200 pages of edits, which means that I cut down on the turnaround time on our next novel. And I thought, well, that's a success.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying that it has to be an unpleasant experience, because a lot of sitting around daydreaming about monsters and stuff is fun, but the actual work is work.
Yeah. I find that what's your process? Because for me, I find that I have to, I write full time. I treat it like a job. And so I have my days where I basically, I aim to write a certain number of words a week. And I have my novels are scheduled out. Like, I know what date I'm likely to finish my novel. And just organization helps me quite a bit. Do you have a specific word count goal you try to reach each day, or how do you structure how you write? Because you write a colossal amount of words per day, as I understand.
I don't have a word count per day, because sometimes the cylinders are cooking and sometimes they're not. Okay. So like I've had some hot days where I've written, like Banshee. I'll give you an example. I wrote 13,000 words in Banshee in a 24-hour period. What? Like the last, I knew where I was going. I knew the last line. I hear Piggy. I can still hear Arante's voice. I knew I had it. And I was like, I have to get there. And so that's the most I've ever written. But if you write, some people like to schedule 2,500 a day, things like that. I like to schedule by the week. And then I turn around and tell my partner, I say, hey, you're getting a manuscript on this day. And because there's, to quote somebody smarter than me, there's nothing to slow you down like having enough time.
Oh, it's very
Yeah.
true, because it feels like the more time you perceive yourself as having, the more you waste. It's very easy to say, I'll get to this later. I'll do this. I'll do that. And by the way, guys in the chat, I've totally been ignoring the chat just because I've been
Sorry.
talking to you. And Howard Cohen, hey Howard, thinks something is so cool. I can't remember what the cool thing is that we were talking about at 20 at that time. But yeah, then Jay Wims, who it's actually new to my show. So hey, mentions a 1980s Mech Warrior for PC. Were you a Mech Warrior player?
Me? No.
Yeah.
No, I was a 2600 guy. I was early, and I was obsessed with a company called iMagick, that had like Riddle of the Sphinx and Dragonfire and all these great early games that you can get for like $900 now if you'd like. Because not many of them survived. So.
And then we have Froey B. Hey, Froey B is in the chat, says, "Oh, giant robot with vampires." Now that is an idea.
I'm listening.
And
I'm listening.
I wrote a giant robot series, and Jacob just finished writing up a Vampire Slayer series. I feel like my brand is like primed for a giant robot vampire story. Well, yeah. Maybe we'll put a pin in that. Oh my gosh, I'm already having fun here. And Howard, the dental story is what Howard was talking about when you met Jay and Cheney. So, all right, so that was the cool thing. All right, now we should probably at some point talk about Backyard Starship, because holy crap, man, the messenger was impressive. But Backyard Starship, I remember there was a period where we were chatting marketing, and I just called you up and saw the success that this series was having and was like, how, man? Like, what'd you do? What was the magic for Backyard Starship?
I think, well, I think I'll tell you where it came from. I'm obsessed with Magnum PI. I have the team ring, actually. Hold on. I have the Magnum PI team ring. Ooh. And it's real. It's this Cross of St. Catherine. It is. I loved Magnum PI, and I loved Magnum PI because of his sense of fair play and honor and dedication to his friends. And he was it was an easy person to find honorable, an easy person to admire. And that's kind of rare. And so, the interaction with his friends, and that ran from 80 to 88, right? And that's just like prime. I'm a sponge at that point. I'm taking in network television. I'm a child of the 70s and 80s. And I went into my bank, and of course it's centered in Iowa, and my family is from Iowa. My dad's from Iowa. And I went into the bank, and they had purchased this giant bronze eagle. I mean, it's like 8 feet across. It's huge. And I was looking at it, and as I saw the afternoon sun coming in, it flickered. The sun came from the third floor down, and it got across its face, and it looked like its eyes flashed. And I thought, what if that was an AI? Like, I just like that, and it came to me. And
is that the origin of Perry then?
That's it. That's where it came. Yes. That is, and Perry, and Perry says, Van says, but I'm not in combat. And Perry says, you will be. And I said, okay. This is where this goes. And Van, I like to approach things from a phrase called the cumulative memory. I think as writers, if your characters don't change and learn from the things that happen to them, then you're a one-trick pony. And the readers will tell you. They'll be like, hey, this is the same thing as book one. This is the same thing as book two. And so it's possible to have camaraderie and jokes and all that stuff, but there should be a maturation to the character. And so I took what I know, which is Iowa, Magnum PI, spaceships, villains who are truly villainous. Not everybody was morally gray. I was like, I'm getting past morally gray. I can do without that at this point. Like, I enjoy it occasionally, but not everybody has the capacity to be a supervillain or a nun. Right. I mean, it just doesn't. So. And that's where it came from. And the thing is, when I wrote the first chapter, I sat down and I said, I know what this is going to entail in terms of where the story could go. And I think I had the first 5 books mapped out in 10 days.
Oh, wow.
And I knew what we were going to do and where we were going. And certain people got away from me. Characters, they teach you about themselves.
Oh,
Um,
yes.
Tarina is exactly one time in my life I have walked into a room and had my breath taken away by a woman's appearance,
Hmm.
like where it just stopped me, and and I wanted to capture that moment of zeitgeist for Van because it happened to me, and I was like,
Hmm.
and then I wrote her with this sort of aloof elegance, and then she warms up and becomes all the things that partners with Van and sort of dovetails with him. Anyway, I'm not so smart that I don't think that there was a touch of luck. Obviously, like I said, lightning in a bottle,
Oh,
because
yeah.
we never ran an ad for 3 years. We
Really?
zeroed. We did. I couldn't even tell you how to run an Amazon ad. I don't know how. I
That
don't
is
know how.
wild.
It was
But you know
entirely
something?
word of mouth.
Something that's really absurd is that the exact same thing, maybe not the exact same thing, but the same thing happened to me with Titan Mage. I didn't advertise it. And in retrospect, like what I think happened was I happened to release it on a really lucky day where like Titan Mage, it's giant robots, but it's also harem.
Oh yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
and to my understanding, there were not a lot of other big harem novels coming out around that time. And so, and I believe I also wrote a really good blurb in terms of keywords for the Amazon algorithm to pick up on. So I posted the pre-orders for the book, and it released in that period with not a lot of competition. It sold really well, and there wasn't a lot of competition for a few weeks, and that just
Oh,
rocketed
great.
it up. And I didn't start advertising it until the sales started slipping, which took several months.
Oh, that's a
And
nice
it's
tale.
yeah, it's wild how just I spent like the first year after that book released and after the series, after I started releasing the series, trying to figure out what I did. and,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
did you do some of that with Backyard Starship and the Messenger?
Well, I wrote. Well, before this, you know what launched this is the Harem series.
Is it
I
really?
Yeah, I wrote. So Jeff and I took a pen name in 2017 called Daniel Pierce, and I
Yes.
wrote Future Reborn. And Jeff called me. He said, "You need to go look at the numbers." And I said, "What?" And I was like, "Wait a minute," because you know what it's like. You're like pulling teeth to get 5 reviews and this thing, and
Yes.
it was like 109 reviews in 5 days. And I thought, "What is happening?" And I kept hearing the same thing from everybody, that Jack Bowman was unapologetically masculine. The women were
Hmm.
hot. It was like, it was basically my love letter to D&D and
Yeah.
Skinamax. Like that was what it was. And
Yes.
I had a guy say, he goes, "Dude, what's up with the redhead thing?" And I said, "Young man, a man reaches a certain point in his life where he experiences changes, and we all go through a redhead phase. We all go like," and I say that as a guy
All
that was like
all of
50
my
at that.
readers are in their redhead phase. Like it's yeah, whenever I ask what kind of girls they want in the harem, like overwhelmingly, there's always a redhead that wins. Like I totally
Bingo.
get this. I
Yep.
think Future Reborn, in retrospect, I think that was the first harem book I read. Like I think that might have been the
Oh,
thing
really?
that one of the things that got me checking out the genre because I just love straightforward manly adventure. And that's the harem genre is where that is kind of migrated to. And
Yes.
yeah, and it's a lot of times like I don't even care about the romances. I mean, being a female reading harem lit, like the romances, whatever. But I really like that fun pulp adventure, and that's where
Yeah.
like harem is where a lot of fun, ridiculous pulp adventure resides.
I
And
I collect I collect those. I'll show you. I love the same ace doubles.
yeah,
Absolute magic. Magic. And you look at the authors and you're like, "Oh my goodness, this is Poul Anderson," and you're like, Keith Bulmer or Kenneth Bulmer. It's like A-level talent writing these little
yeah,
13,000 words. And it's like Doc Savage and stuff like that,
yeah.
unapologetically just over the top masculinity. And it's a ton of fun, kind of James Bondy too. Yeah.
Do
It's
you have a favorite classic pulp novel?
anything by Edgar Rice Burroughs. And I
Oh
don't
yeah,
consider him pulp,
classic.
but I consider him the father of masculinity in terms
Yeah.
of, yes, I do. Actually, I do. If you could consider it pulp, uh, one of the most influential books in my entire life is, it was written in 66. It's called Crown of Infinity.
Mhm.
And
I
it's
feel
an
like
ace
I've heard
double.
of this.
It's an ace double. And it is like every trope that you think, it's like he took every trope and painted the walls with it. And it's awesome. It's like, they're called the Star Kings, and they're genetically enhanced humans that wear a black tight clinging suit with a red S on it, and it's the Star Kings forever. And this tells you how old, like, my MySpace page tagline was Star Kings forever,
Uh-huh.
like way back, and everything. That's how. But you read it and you go, this is absolutely fantastic. If you take it a little bit tongue in cheek,
Hmm.
it's just magnificent. Because I like serious. I was talking to one of my closest friends today about how sometimes as writers we read a book and the first sentence absolutely is like being slapped in the face. It's so good. It's just
Yes.
offensive. Like Tim O'Brien, Robert Penn Warren, Hemingway. All these. You read it and you go, well, I can quit. You read. You look at it and you go, I'm never going to write anything that lyrical
Yep.
in my
Yep.
entire life. And so you just do what you can with what you've
You
got.
do your best.
Yeah, do your
I have
best.
that experience every time I read a Terry Pratchett book. Like I have
Oh,
to there's so many sentences in Terry Pratchett where I just have to go take a walk after I read them because they're just so good. And I
yeah,
aspire to write like Terry Pratchett, but I can
yeah,
only aspire to write
yeah.
like Terry Pratchett because
I'm
he's the
halfway there. I'm
master of that.
Terry. I got his first
You
name.
you have more of an advantage than me.
Yeah,
Oh man. All right. Let's talk about the Kickstarter because you just
yeah,
had a excuse me, words, magnificently successful Kickstarter that you were running is it the first Backyard Starship book?
yeah. It's
Yes.
it's a super fancy version. It's so beautiful. Um, oh, it's lovely. Anyway, and
I'm
then
gonna
special art and all kinds of cool stuff. All kinds of cool
I'm gonna
stuff
put
with
the
it.
link in the chat, but tell us a little bit about it. What kind of goodies are we getting in this thing?
We there's Oh my god. Well, the book itself is just exquisite. I collect classic hardback fiction, and it's called Forged in Foil. It's in different multiple foils. The Moon Sword is on one
Ooh.
side. The Dust Jacket is the Fafnir and Perry, and then that things just got crazy. We funded it in 28 minutes.
What?
So yeah, 28 minutes it funded, and I went, what? And it was I think just before I logged in, it was like 37,000 and something, and
Mm-hmm.
funding 5K. So we were past that almost out of the gate. And
That is insane.
we hired a really good artist. In another life, I was an oil painter, and I wanted to be an oil painter, and I was obsessed with
Uh-huh.
Michael Whalen and Boris. Obviously, you can
Oh
see,
yeah.
Boris, all these. And fortunately, somebody talked me out of it because they said, you can paint in your free time. And I was like, oh, okay. So, but I was able to make pretty detailed notes to give her. And,
Mm-hmm.
and like I explained Tarina, like, what does Tarina look like? Well, it's one thing to say she's got dark hair, and looks vaguely like this, or she
Mm-hmm.
looks like this actress or something like that. I was going for mood. Like I said, when she walks in, she is a wall of ice.
Mm-hmm.
That's the first phrase. And she said, I got it. I got it. Wall of ice, because I wanted that austere beauty that's off-putting, that like
Mm-hmm.
makes people kind of lean back and then warms up to you. And she absolutely got it perfect. So there's a bunch of art. We offered to write short stories for people, was another thing, and somebody took us up on it. And I've got everybody's been asking for this one particular thing. I won't say what the spoiler is, but one particular thing in Backyard, I intentionally left like a hole, left it blank. And
Mm-hmm.
everybody said, I want to know about it. And so I wrote the core of the story, and I'm going to finish it, and they're going to get first look. They're going to get it. And then another thing, name a villain, name a
Uh-huh.
race, name, stuff like that. And which is always fun because you never know what people are going to create, because everybody's secretly creative. I think
Oh yeah.
that culture tamps it down a little. But anyway, yeah. So there's all kinds of good things. We're past 2 or 3 of the stretch goals right now
Yeah.
already, and we've got 20 days to go. So
Wow. This is
yeah.
going to be incredible. So, what kind of stretch goal rewards are there still to be reached?
Oh, I think. Well, I better get with somebody about that. We need to ask. I don't know. So I said I was editing this. I was editing and signing. I signed 500 book inserts for the Backyard Starship Forged and Foil. I was signing book inserts last night while listening to metal. so the signatures may be a little aggressive, but yeah, one of the stretch goals we hit is a dust jacket that's a linear dust jacket that's done with Perry and the Fafnir, which is something that I wanted everybody to see, because when I made the Fafnir in my mind, the entire universe was going to have a modular ship construction, like modular in much the way that smaller submarines are made. And I thought that was really clever, like the Liberty ships in the 30s and 40s, or 40s, excuse me. And so that's what we went with, and she got it perfectly right.
Nice. No, there's so much exciting stuff. I'm so pumped that this thing went so well for you so fast. I get super excited whenever my friends' Kickstarters just kick butt.
I do too. Through osmosis, I get, a vicarious thrill for everybody when they, because people say you're in competition, and I'm like, have you seen how many books are out there? You're not going to be, you're one in a drop of an ocean. There's plenty of room to play.
I very much take a rising tide lifts all boats approach to publishing. And because the thing is too, like I continually promote my author friends' books because I am convinced that at least some of my success is due to my author friends sharing stuff religiously whenever I share it. Like we're always sharing each other's links whenever we post them and stuff like that. And it's, it's a little bit here and there sometimes, but it adds up. And there is literally no downside to promoting your author pal's work.
No, and you might, and it also, that if you have friends who are great writers, it makes it that much. That there's two kinds of stages when you're a baby author. There's when you hand your book to a relative and they go, "Oh, you wrote a book," versus, "Oh, you wrote a book." They read it, they go, "Okay, this is serious. This is a tool of entertainment. This is serious," and you hope to reach that. Well, I happen to be around some of the best writers working. Period.
Yeah.
Who were like active friends of mine. And I've been friends with them for 10 years now. Like, you guys started writing, and I think you can almost kind of tell based on how somebody approaches the craft if you're going to make it or not. And I use make it sort of like, I remember talking to Jacob about covers. And I said, and we were both on the same, you can't see personality across the room. Therefore, the cover is important. And I just thought that was, and when I see somebody take it seriously, and when I say somebody grasp that occasionally less is more, because, so many of us are 80% of us are buying it from a thumbnail on this. So does it, you don't want hieroglyphics, so if they show that attention to detail, they make it.
I think that one thing a lot of new authors really hate to realize about writing is that in order to be successful at it, it's not enough to write well. You have to treat it like a business. And there's a lot that goes into that. And one could even argue that it's not enough to write well if you're not writing what people want to read. Because there are books that I've read that are amazingly written, but there's not a market for them. And there's authors have mixed opinions about writing to market. But if you want to be a career writer, there's something to it.
And also you have to have thick skin and understand that I'm not making foie gras, I'm making cheeseburgers. Like, there can be lyrical and artistic quality to what I'm doing, but I don't take myself I'm making no pants jokes and cheese jokes and, stuff like that. And I never bought into the tortured artist thing. I find it kind of, and invariably when you go to your first events, you get placed next to somebody who thinks that it's like life or death about whether or not somebody gets the subtext in their vampire novel. And I'm like, I mean, good for you. That's cool. But it also doesn't assume the intelligence of the audience. I don't over explain jokes. I just make the joke and move on, or make the emotive statement and move on. And everybody goes, okay. And they come along with you. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, I enjoy writing subtext because I used to be an English teacher, so that's just in me. But
That's right, you
also,
did. That's right.
yeah, but at the same time, I don't want the subtext to make the story unreadable. And so I always focus on fun first. And it's and yeah, there are a lot of nuances to writing, and each genre has its own different standards too, and it's really funny. I love reading romance reviews,
Oh,
especially romantic fantasy, because you can
yeah.
absolutely tell who is coming to the genre as a romance reader and who is coming to the genre as a primarily fantasy reader. Because a lot of hardcore fantasy readers don't realize that romantasy has an entirely different set of tropes. And it's really fun to me to just read those things.
Somebody just
But
wrote, sometimes the curtains are just blue. That's one of my
yes.
favorite statements. That's
Yes.
I'll tell you how you can, you know how when you see behind the curtain you can never unsee.
Yeah.
My best friend's a scientist. He's an entomologist by trade, and he's a scientist. And he gave me a book a few years ago. It's called A Billion Wicked Thoughts, and
Oh, I've read that. I am reading this
it
right
is
now.
the last two chapters. I always hand it to my author friends because I'm like, look, if you want to understand the power of trope and the power of expectation, with
Yep.
and you read the sample data on the words that are important to women versus the words
Hmm.
that are important to men, and it's just absolutely illuminating, and
Oh yeah.
it changed the dynamic of how I thought about relationships in my books.
Hmm.
Van and Tarina stand next to each other. They don't even hold hands, because all the people that I know that are really in love, like if you're in love, you stand
Hmm.
next to the person like you are an old friend.
Yeah.
Like there's this comfort and presence and belonging to them. You don't you don't have to wave a flag, you know.
Yeah.
And I love that low, like I guess they call it slow burn and stuff like this. I don't write romance, but the relationships are incredibly important. And also the other thing is you're letting them come together of their own volition.
Right.
I think adds a credibility to their connection as a couple, because like you're writing a power couple in a sense.
Hmm.
Um, and so but A Billion Wicked Thoughts for me was an incredible tool that showed me and kind of exposed the industry as a whole.
Hmm. Yeah, it was a really good read for me too, and I'm not finished with it yet, but especially as someone who writes not only romance, but men's romance, writing
Yeah.
as a woman, it is very, very fascinating to me.
Yes.
And it is heavily informed. Even now, I think I'm only like one third of the way in, but even now, it is heavily informed how I write, what I write,
Yeah.
and and let's see here. And I'm checking out the comments here. And by the way, guys, if you have any questions for Terry, feel free to put them in the comments. He's got a lot of series to ask questions about. And I know I saw a Facebook comment when I posted about this earlier. Someone told you to write more Messenger Core.
Yeah.
So I'm
Yeah.
relaying
Sean,
that
he
information.
did.
But let's see here. We've got you're also revamping your YouTube channel. So what are you doing
Yeah.
with your YouTube channel these days? I've got that link up in the show notes, and I'll put that in the comments too. But you got a cute little new logo and everything. I love it. It looks so
I,
fun.
I got, it's fan service. It's
Mhm.
fan service in the sense that, and also because I was a history professor for 5 years, and then I got recruited kind of to teach in an MFA,
Mhm.
science fiction and fantasy writing. But they wanted working authors. They wanted people that understood the granular nature and mechanical nature of being an author. And I
Mhm.
thought I really respected that. I said, great, we're not talking theory, we're talking where the rubber
Yeah.
meets the road.
Right.
So I taught for 3 years, and I was very happy to be a part of the program. And my students, you keep hearing the same questions, that are insightful questions. And I
Mhm.
thought, okay, I can, in small doses, I can make videos about talking about, because the videos I made in 2015 may as well been in cuneiform. It's not the same. It's
Oh
not the
yeah.
same world at all.
Yeah.
And so I
It's not
thought,
the
well,
same writing world as it was 5 years ago. Like
oh,
it's
oh
the writing
no,
world evolves so fast.
it's I think it's almost got like a 30-month cycle. It's
Yeah.
not quite 3 years. To me, it looks like, I think about all the drastic changes we've done, especially in
Hmm.
art. Like a friend of mine, Stacy, is a great romance writer. She's just a great writer who happens to write romance.
Hmm.
But she's also a graphic designer, and she's got a really incredible sense of taste and style. And I remember when this is a few years ago, she went to vector drawings
Mhm.
from photo manipulation. And I said, well, that's kind of different. And she said, Terry, trust me. And I walked into a Barnes and Noble like 2 months later, and it was a wall of
Yep.
pink and green and yellow vector drawings. And I was like, she was ahead of the curve. She
Mhm.
understood. So it's the half-life of it is quite short.
Mhm.
And I think that's partially by design because Amazon wants to, of course, extract revenue from
Exactly. Yeah. It
both.
seems like the algorithm changes. Like it's my understanding that we're actually about to come up on another significant algorithm change, which I'm not looking
Yes.
forward to. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's something that keeps you on your toes.
Yeah. Well, you can, sometimes people will say, just write the books and everything else takes care of itself. And that is adorable, but not true.
Yeah, that is
And you and I
that is
both know that.
actually that's a piece of advice. Like that is a piece of writing advice that actually makes me so mad when I hear it
Yeah.
because write the story you want to write without thinking about the industry or anything. That has killed so many careers before they've started. And like
Yes.
if you're writing for a hobby, that's fine. If you are intentionally just writing to get your book out there and get your story out there, that's fine. But most authors do not put all that effort into a book just to sell 30 copies to their family and friends.
Correct.
And yeah, and
It's it's a task to write a
yeah.
book I think I ran a couple marathons just because I wasn't that bright, but I ran a couple marathons, and there's a small portion of Americans who've run marathons. And
Mhm.
then there's a smaller portion of people who've written books. And because writing books it requires extended dedication to a task.
Mhm.
And I think that is, a lot of people have 2 to 4 chapters of a book sitting somewhere on a laptop or in a drawer.
Yep.
Um, and that's the difference between a pro and an amateur is you just don't quit.
Yeah.
So I hear a lot of bad advice, and that is probably the number 2 reason why I'm motivated to put up the YouTube channel or to
Mhm.
restart it. Just because I'll be at a conference and someone will be next to me telling someone what is anathema to being. They'll actually give them advice. Like I've heard a couple people say things that will get you drummed out of social media for inappropriate content where,
Mhm.
and you're like, hey, pump the brakes. Let me just tell you what happened to Jane Smith when she did this 18 months
Yeah.
ago.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, it's fine. And I'm like, it's actually not fine. And here's
Yeah.
why. It's not that
Yeah.
I'm
Here's
not, I'm not some kind of Stasi telling people what they can and cannot do, but the market tells you what you can and
yeah.
cannot do. Much more so than your own taste. Or now it may happen that you just get obsessed with something cool like giant robots. And I also collect vintage West German barometers. It's like a weird thing that I got into.
Okay, I need to know the story behind this.
I
Why?
I I think what Bakelite is. Bakelite, the material from the 20s and 30s.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like, okay, my grandfather had a Bakelite air guide weather station, and it's very 30s retro. It's just got this incredible Art Deco vibe to it. And I was at a sale one day, and for $5, there was this West German barometer, and I was like, huh, because West Germany doesn't exist anymore. And then I found
Mhm.
another one, and it had a cuckoo clock in it, and I was like, there is a whole undercurrent or an underworld of people that collect vintage weather devices. And I was
Yeah.
like, so before I knew it, I had like 50 of them,
Were people just giving them to you? Because
Oh yeah, that's yep,
I
yep.
I did not expect this. What I got into fountain pens, and I didn't
Oh,
realize there
yeah.
was a whole fountain pen culture. I just like to write with them because I go through so much ink that like I go through like 2 inserts a day when I write with my fountain pen. And so I would go through so many disposable pens. But yeah, I had friends, writer friends who once they found out I was into
Oh,
fountain pens, they would bring me pens to like welcome me to the club. And these were not cheap pens. And I'm like,
yeah,
how can you just give these away? And
yeah. Ask one of your friends. Ask a friend if they've ever made the tragic mistake of telling people that they like cows.
oh my
Like
goodness.
before you know it, they're like, oh honey, guess what? I was in Beaumont, Texas at a yard sale, and I found this, and you can't say no, and it's a 2.5 foot tall ceramic cow, and their house is so full of cows within 60 days that they can't
My
get away.
grandmother had a cow collection. She loved cows. And so I fully understand this exact
Yeah.
example.
Yeah.
Now, one thing I want to go back to is the concept of writing advice and the whole experience of your writing career. What would you say is the biggest lesson learned over the course of it? Or put another way, what's something that you wish you knew when you first started out?
Don't overcomplicate. Oh yeah, that's easy. Oh, okay. I thought I was smarter than the audience.
Mm,
I thought I wanted to write this labyrinthine story, based on Elizabeth Bathory, and it's a 2.75 to 3-star novel, is what
mhm,
it is, because I was in my own way. And
mhm.
and I was channeling Proust. I was like, why say it in 9 words when 53 will do? And I was like, okay, it was too dense, it was too long. And
Yep.
once again, a friend of mine came in and said and read, and she found this sentence, and it said, um, "Cora drowned, but not right away." She found
Ooh.
that sentence. And she said, "That's your first sentence, and you've got 3,216 words before it."
Mm,
Said, "That's a problem." And I said,
yeah.
and she said, "Cut it, cut it." And I did. And do you know, it made the book so much better. And I thought, okay, where else can I do that? So I talk about, we all face writer's block. I don't face it because I never have one novel going.
Mhm.
And I always tell people, you cannot tell me that you have not achieved an emotional state during that 24 hours, because if I get angry in traffic or whatever it is, I come home and I use that to write the character that is
Yep.
experiencing a conflict. Or if I meet somebody who's just like an absolute gem of a person, I come home and I get a warm and fuzz. So I let my day inform my fiction,
Mhm.
um, and I keep 4 or 5 irons in the fire at all times.
I do
But
the exact same thing, not necessarily in terms of stories, but in terms of writer's block. If I have I usually don't have writer's block because I work from outlines. They're very skeletal
yeah,
outlines,
yeah,
but I don't write without an outline these days. But sometimes the words just aren't coming. And one of the most reliable techniques that I found is to just pull from any random thing that has caught my attention that day. And it can be the interaction between two people at the coffee shop near me, or it can
yep,
be a meme that I've read, or it can be anything. And so a lot of times in the act of simply describing that thing or thinking about how this thing could affect this scene, my scene suddenly starts flowing again.
clarifies.
And
Yep.
it's really cool that that happens.
Yeah, that's
But
once again, your world informs,
yeah.
um, and and also, I think writers are sponges. People
Oh, yeah.
like, I'm always observing. I was writing a character, and one of my partners said, "Hey, where'd you get the idea for this?" And I said, "I was opening up a bank account in Glasgow, Kentucky in 1998. And this banker had the most awe-inspiring facial expression that I have ever seen. I might live to be 100, and it will not be topped." And I said, "I've never forgotten her."
Uh-huh.
And the beauty of it was, she spelled her name with one I,
Uh-huh.
and it was she winked after she talked to you, like and it was really over and everything. And I said, "This is just like," and I never forgot that. And I remember I was writing the halfway, and halfway, I saw a really, really attractive, well-groomed 50-ish woman with money.
Mhm. Mhm.
And she did the least upper crust thing I've ever seen. She went like this. She gave finger guns to the guy at the bakery, and she went like this. And I stood there for a minute, and it was like an electric shock. I thought, this has to go into the book, because it was so
Yes.
incongruous with the rest of her.
Yes.
Her Hermes bag and everything. And I was like, wow, that it was, I did not expect it. And I thought, okay, the contrast is what makes it good.
Mhm.
Um, and so you know, I think if you ask most working authors like us, we'll never run out of stories. We'll
Oh,
just run out
yeah.
of time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of stories, you have anything coming out new? What's come
Yes,
out
I'm
most
writing.
recently this year and what's coming out? What's next on the list?
I'm I'm writing for 2027 right now.
What?
I signed a wonderful, I'm with Podium for the audio. I love Podium. They've been very good to me,
Mhm.
wonderful to me since the beginning. And my business partner he wasn't a sports guy. And he
Mhm.
watched the Michael Jordan documentary. And he said he couldn't believe the intensity. And I played sports in high school and college. And I was like, yeah, the
Mhm.
intensity is just off the charts. And I said, did you know that Ted Williams, who was arguably the greatest hitter in baseball, was drafted or volunteered to be a fighter pilot in World War II at the peak of his career? And he was like, really? And I had an idea for what if the greatest athlete in the world just walked away from it and went to go fight aliens?
Mhm.
And it's it's both a cultural clash. It's a morality play where this guy's a billionaire. He's won all these medals, and he comes from nothing. His Achilles heel is his poverty and his upbringing, because my family had a crushing poverty, and it informed everything they did for the rest of their life. It's called Gold Medal Marine, and I'm in book 3. It's going to go 6 or 12. It's just too big a story. And then I came up with, the pressure to create another backyard is like, but I said, I'll let it come to me. I'll let it come to me. And I was minding my own business, going through some early 2000s memorabilia. And there was a picture of the butler from Joe Millionaire. Do you remember that, Joe Millionaire?
I remember the name, but I don't remember anything else about it.
Well, his name is, first of all, his name's also Paul Hogan, like the crocodile, his name's Paul Hogan. And I saw a picture of this cat and I said, and his derisive, dismissive nature of all these girls that were on the show was just solid gold. I was like, oh my gosh, you can't. So I was like, what if you took him, put him on a wafer, and put that wafer in a robotic AI body? And he was, and because and the other concept of it is this guy who's a fireman in space, and it's so critical, fire management systems in the Navy and everything.
Oh yeah.
And he's accused of a crime he doesn't commit. He's kicked out. He has nowhere to go, but a job comes up where he can be from the scum of the earth and the galaxy, debt collector, which is just so in opposite of who he is in terms of his morals and his value as a human. But he's got to assemble a crew. And so he's got that robot butler that is just, has contempt for everybody. And then he has a shape-shifting man-eater named Cammy, who she loves men, but she loves money, and she loves collecting debt. And she's absolute, like, she's really clever. Like, I like her. She's very fox clever. And yet at the same time lives kind of like loud. And I was like, okay. And I wrote down, like, I got like 7,500 words, and I pitched it, and I said, this is what I see for 2027. And they were like, yep, that's it. So we're looking, I guess I'm out to 2028, maybe.
Wow.
For that. And we're going 40 deep in backyard. Woo. Like I committed, I said, because everybody was very good to me, and they have been really good to us. And I said, I'm going to take 2 weeks out of my life, and I'm going to brainstorm. And I carry a green notebook with me everywhere. And I said, I'm going to give them what they want. And I listened to everybody, and I just started pulling all these threads that I've compiled over 3.5 million words of fiction. And I said, okay, I can do this. And more importantly, I can do it and give them something that isn't fluff, because I wouldn't do that.
How many have released in the series thus far? Because one just came out, right? 27.
27. I finished 28 last night. Yeah.
Nice. There's plenty more to look forward to.
Oh yeah,
there's more to catch up with for me, because I'm a super slow reader, and I want to say I've finished book 1. I can't remember if I've started book 2 yet. Like, I haven't met all these fun characters that keep popping up in the Facebook group. I know Perry.
Yeah, oh yeah, I love it. Well, that goes back to, like, people say, where did you come up with the contrast? Like, Fun Boy is like, has his own fan club. and
Oh,
fun boy. But I was
yes.
like, what if you took a dour germaphobe, but you gave him an incredibly high libido? and and I was like, okay, let's talk that through, And I wrote a short story to introduce him, and it's called the Case of the Unwashed Stiletto, and his race is called the Surtsey, and they just love rules, and they love hand washing, and they don't believe in laughter or smiling or things like this, and it's
Mhm.
just an incredibly hilarious society. And he has a meddling cousin who, when he graduates med school, she signs him up for a 28-day cruise ship experience. And of course, sneeze guards and people doing the conga line and everything. It's just
Yep.
a complete nightmare for him. And a crime occurs, and it's like a, sort of a Columbo episode. But I wrote that because I was like, the contrast is what makes it good.
Mhm.
And that's some of the advice. That's going to be like the second video I do on the channel. They can't be one-dimensional. If you're
Mhm.
writing a character, they cannot be.
Especially not in a 40-book series.
No. No.
Who's your favorite character in Backyard Starship
Oh
that you've
man.
written? There's with that many books,
That
there's
is,
so many to choose from.
wow. I think I like Icky for the
Mhm.
simple fact that like Icky is vaguely based on a friend of mine who is like a tall, goofy, silly, sweet, big boned girl. Like
Uh-huh.
just and when she walks into the room, she also has big hair. It's never stopped me in 1988 for her, and she's just unapologetic about it. But her confident, like if you went up and you said, "Hey, you need to drop a few," she'd go, "Thanks." Like, I mean, it just doesn't even register with her. And you say, "Oh, that's a pretty dress," and she goes, "I know, isn't it?" Like that's just how she is.
Oh, I love
And
her already.
oh yeah, yeah, yeah. And Icky's always got noodles in her fur and stuff like that. And I was like, that's basically me, because I'm barely civilized. I'm almost feral, like I had to put a shirt on for this because I was out working in the strawberry patch. And but yeah, probably Icky. And then Gabby got away from me. Like I thought Gabby was going to be one thing, and then Gabby turned into this entirely different thing. And then we dealt with the concept of PTSD with Gabby. Um,
Ah.
and yeah, like we handled it. Like I wanted to write that Gabby had a hideous
Mhm.
wound. And
Mhm.
I cut my finger off 22 years ago, and I woke
What?
up in the hospital not knowing where I was. Yeah, I cut my finger off and like off, but
Uh-huh.
it's sewed back on. But it was my Frankenfinger for a year, and it like messed me up in the head for a couple of years, and
Yeah.
that wasn't even that big a deal. That's just a finger. And
Yeah.
I was thinking, what if you have something like apocalyptic happen to you? And
Mhm.
so I really like the direction she went as well.
Nice. That actually brings up an interesting question. So I consider a lot. I consider The Messenger. I consider Backyard Starship effectively escapist literature. But obviously, you've dealt
Yes.
with some deep and hard stuff in it. What with PTSD? How do you balance the dark subject matter with the light vibe? Because that's a very fine line to straddle.
Um, it is. First of all, yes, you're right. I can't agree with you more because if it's not handled properly, it comes across as cloying and preaching.
Hmm.
And if it's handled too breezy, then it comes across as dismissive of someone's pain.
Hmm.
And I'm a product of a violent childhood, and I don't. So I've got thick skin anyway. But I tell people I'm never going to dismiss the harm that has been done to other people. Like get over it. That's not a phrase that I ever use.
Hmm.
But I think it is. I'll give you an example of how to. I bought a bar. I owned a bar for years, right?
Hmm.
I owned a pub, and we had music and everything. And I had to establish that you weren't going to mistreat the staff. That was one
Hmm.
thing that nowhere in the sign up program was it getting mistreated. And the first day I said, no matter what happens, everybody, don't let anything happen to my left hand. And God bless one of the bartenders. She said, "Why, Terry?" And I said, "Because this is the one that signs the checks." And everybody was like, "Gotcha, boss." And I was like, "I'll never ask you to do anything that I won't do, and nothing is ever going to happen to you that you don't want to,
Mhm.
even though we're serving alcohol. So I threw out, on the first night we opened up, I threw out a member of the band that was playing because he got inappropriate with one of the bartenders. And he said, "Do you know who I am?" And I said, "Yeah." "Do you know who I am? I'm the guy signing the checks out here. Beat it." And I threw him out. And that established, I made it a little bit of a light moment because I didn't want to bring the room down. But I also showed that you can talk seriously about something for a short amount of time and leaven it with humor afterwards, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's kind of how I've approached writing. You don't make fun in the moment, but if you know anybody who's military, or dark humor it's pretty funny.
Absolutely.
It's
Yes.
pretty, my best friends and I joke about things that are not funny at all, except to us.
Yeah,
And so
and
you
in
have
a
to
lot
make
of ways, it's almost necessary to help some people through those things. Like
it's
humor is a
cathartic.
way to process really terrible things. And
Yes, it's cathartic. It's cathartic to the extent that something that was crippling to a person can be laughed about years later, filtered through the lens of time and
exactly.
friendship. And to me, that is, that's something that you have to handle with care, but it is something that I think is possible even in adventure fiction. Adventure fiction can have
Mm-hmm.
serious themes.
Mm-hmm. And we've got John in the chat says that the Venn diagram of military humor and dark humor is a circle.
It's a circle. It's a circle. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
All right. Well, we are past the hour. This went by
Okay.
super fast. So,
Yeah.
so before I close this out, though, I'm going to ask if anyone wants to get any books signed or otherwise meet you. Do you have any signings, cons? What you got coming up?
I'll be at Dragon Con. I'll be at Dragon Con for the whole kit and caboodle. I was at Liberty Con. Wonderful. I'll be at Dragon Con. I'll be teaching in October, teaching and attending a conference up in Illinois, and I'll talk about that. But yeah, I'm always, if you see me at a con, I'm always available because I don't sleep and I never sit down.
And he's super fun to talk to, guys, as you can probably guess from this entire podcast. Well,
You
thank
are
you,
too.
Terry,
You
for
should
joining.
make sure that you tell people. Make sure to tell people about your books because I'm really proud of you.
Oh yes,
I thought you
well,
hit your stride. I
I
knew
guess
when I
I
saw
should
that
talk
cover.
about. I guess I should talk
Yep.
about my own books on my own podcast, shouldn't I? Though, speaking
Yes.
of which, I actually have I have an anthology coming out. It's not a complete me anthology. It's from Bain Books. It's called Dancing with Destruction, and it comes out, I want to say, Tuesday. And the basic premise of this anthology was Bain commissioned some cover art for one book, but ended up deciding not to use it for that book. But it was still really kick-ass cover art, so they still wanted to use it somewhere. And so they handed it to Jason Cordova, the editor, and said, "Do something with this." And he basically approached a bunch of authors and said, "Hey, here's your prompt. You have this art. Let's you want to write a story about it?" And so it's effectively an anthology of stories that are written exclusively inspired by this art. And the art
Cool.
itself, oh, I've actually got the book here. Let me get away from my desk for a second. I got a whole mess in here. So here's the book. And if you look closely, you can see this kind of like 80s predator type character with military figures going around and panicking about it. Jacob and I collaborated on a story for it as Jacob Hollow and Edie Sky. It's in his Freelancers of Neptune Soul Blazers universe, but being that it is an Edie Sky story as well as a Jacob Hollow story, you know what happens in it. And but yeah,
does it rhyme with second base?
It definitely has some hot aliens in it. But yeah, in terms of other stuff that I've written, like Titan Mage, giant robots, and spiciness is my biggest series. We just wrapped up Blood Knight, which is basically hot vampire slayers, and I am about halfway through writing the first book in a Titan Mage offshoot series called Titan Mage Havoc. And so my stuff is similar to yours in that it's all fun escapism. Like I like there are some there dark elements, but they're very carefully balanced with the lightness. And so yeah, there's fun stuff in my books. But let's see.
Good.
We have more comments coming on, and let's see. Oh, John says ED/HP is awesome. Thank you, John. And then Howard says it's a great series like your Soul Blazer story. And then John Aldridge says, slow burn in that series refers to space engines. Yeah, the Soul Blazer series itself is not spicy, but I put some spices in it for this short story. So
Okay.
and then I've got another. The Monster Girl Tamer is another of my series coming out as Edie Sky, and book 2 is going to wrap up that series in August, so that's up for pre-order. So yeah, loads of
Is that
stuff.
the is that the one with the girl with big lungs
Huh?
on the front?
With big
There
lungs.
was I didn't want to say anything inappropriate, but I saw one of your covers
that
and I was like,
that can refer to a lot of my books. Yeah, I've got like a Minotaur girl with the cowgirl theme on the front of this book, and
outstanding.
it is magnificent. Mona ended up being one of my favorite characters I've ever written. So there's
I can
there's loads of stuff to look forward to, you guys, both from me and from Terry. Go read all of it. But yeah, thank you, Terry, for joining me, and thank you
thank you
everyone
very
in the
much.
comments for hanging out with us for this hour. This has been super fun, and I'll have to have you on whenever something else comes out. But yeah, everybody
Cool.
go enter to win a signed book from Terry, go contribute to the Kickstarter, go do all the things. And
Okay.
that'll be it. So bye.